I never thought my 21st birthday would end with me holding my face, blood dripping onto the cake, while my guests stared in horrified silence. Birthdays are supposed to be about celebration, laughter, and unforgettable memories. And mine was unforgettable, but for all the wrong reasons. The night had started with glittering lights, upbeat music, and the warmth of friends who came to celebrate with me. Everything felt like a dream, until my sister decided to turn it into a nightmare. She had always been competitive with me, but that night her jealousy was palpable. As the room filled with cheers and the sound of clinking glasses, I could feel her eyes following me, not with love, but with something darker. At first I ignored it, convincing myself that I was overthinking. But then, in front of everyone I loved, she made her move. It wasn't just a push or a harsh word. It was violence. Her hand came crashing down faster than my brain could process, and suddenly pain exploded across my face. My nose broke instantly, and the sound of it still echoes in my head. Gasps filled the room, the music stopped, and the celebration froze in time. In that moment, I wasn't the birthday girl anymore. I was the girl humiliated, betrayed, and left bleeding in front of everyone. The questions swirled immediately. Why would she do this? What drove her to such rage on my special night? And that's exactly what I need to share with you. How my birthday turned into the most painful and shocking night of my life. When I think back to that night, I can still smell the vanilla candles, hear the laughter of my friends, and feel the nervous excitement of turning 21. I had been waiting for this milestone for years, imagining a magical evening where I could finally celebrate adulthood surrounded by people who mattered to me most. The decorations sparkled, the drinks flowed, and the music filled every corner of the house. It was supposed to be perfect, but perfection is fragile. As the night unfolded, I started noticing the tension in my sister's eyes. She smiled for the pictures, clapped during the toast, and even hugged me when I blew out the candles, but beneath it all, I sensed something simmering. I brushed it off because I wanted to believe the night was about love, not rivalry. I had no idea just how wrong I was. The shocking moment when she broke my nose wasn't just an act of violence, it was a revelation. It forced me to confront truths about our relationship that I had ignored for years. Looking back, the signs were always there, hidden in small comments, subtle gestures, and unspoken resentment. That night, in front of everyone, it all erupted. And now, I want to take you on that journey with me. In this video, I'll tell you exactly what happened before, during, and after the moment that changed everything. You'll hear about the hidden jealousy, the sudden explosion, and the painful aftermath that left me questioning not just my sister, but myself. So stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a story about a ruined birthday. It's about betrayal, family, and the scars we carry when love turns violent. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single detail. The morning of my 21st birthday began like any other, but inside me, the weight of anticipation felt heavier than usual. I had been planning this party for months, going over every little detail to make sure it would be perfect. The balloons, the cake, the lights, everything had to shine because this was more than just a birthday. It was a milestone, a passage into adulthood, and I wanted it to be remembered for all the right reasons. As I looked in the mirror while doing my makeup, I whispered to myself, "This is your night." At that moment, I had no idea how wrong I was. My sister, on the other hand, seemed strangely detached that morning. She didn't offer the usual cheerful, happy birthday that she had given me every year since we were kids. Instead, she mumbled something under her breath and disappeared into her room. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was tired or stressed, but deep down, her silence felt heavy. Growing up, she had always been the louder one, the one who wanted the spotlight, while I usually stayed quiet. This time, though, the spotlight was mine, and I could already sense her discomfort. As the day went on, the house transformed into a celebration space. Friends started arriving with gifts, hugs, and laughter, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. I was glowing, wearing a dress I had saved for months just for this moment. I felt beautiful, powerful, and proud of myself. My sister greeted the guests too, flashing her smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Every time someone complimented me, I noticed her jaw tighten ever so slightly. It was subtle, but I caught it. The music played loudly, filling the living room with joy. People danced, chatted, and clinked their glasses. My friends pulled me into selfies, and every picture captured the happiness I thought would last all night. I remember holding the microphone to thank everyone for being there, and as I looked around the room, my heart swelled. I wanted to freeze that exact moment before everything shattered. But even as I spoke, I could feel her presence behind me. My sister stood in the corner, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She laughed at the right moments, nodded when people spoke to her, but I knew her too well. Her laughter was hollow, her eyes restless. And though no one else seemed to notice, my instincts told me something was wrong. Dinner was served, and the room grew louder with chatter and clinking silverware. I sat surrounded by friends, basking in the warmth of the night. My sister sat across from me, barely touching her food. Every time I looked up, I found her staring at me, quickly averting her gaze when I met her eyes. A part of me wanted to confront her, to ask what was going on, but I told myself not to ruin the night. After all, it was my birthday, and I wanted peace, not drama. As the night deepened, the drinks flowed more freely, and the laughter grew bolder. My friends began sharing stories about me, embarrassing, funny, heartfelt memories that made everyone laugh. Each word was a reminder of how loved I was, how this night truly belonged to me. Yet, from the corner of my eye, I could see my sister sinking further into herself. Her smile tightened whenever my name was praised, and her hands fiddled nervously with her glass. The cake was brought out with candles glowing brightly, and the entire room erupted in song. I closed my eyes, made a wish, and blew them out with a heart full of gratitude. The cheers filled the air, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe everything was fine. My sister clapped along, even hugged me, and whispered, "Happy birthday." For a second, I almost believed it was sincere. But then I caught her whispering to one of our cousins, her face tense, her voice sharp. They both glanced at me, then quickly turned away when they saw I had noticed. My stomach tightened. I didn't know what she said, but I could feel the hostility growing thicker, almost tangible. Something inside me whispered that the night was about to take a dark turn. Still, I tried to ignore it, choosing instead to dance with my friends. The music thumped through the walls, my laughter echoed, and the celebration carried on. Yet, every time I spun around the room, my eyes would meet hers. It was as if she was waiting, watching, calculating something. And in that final moment before everything collapsed, I realized the party had become more than just a celebration. It was a stage for something I wasn't prepared to face. Because when she finally snapped, it wouldn't just be a fight between sisters. It would be the kind of moment that leaves scars, both visible and invisible, and one that no guest in that room would ever forget. When I was a child, my sister was everything to me. She was older by only 2 years, but at that age, 2 years feels like a lifetime. I followed her everywhere, mimicking her every move, desperate to be included in her games. Sometimes she let me in, but more often than not, she pushed me aside, reminding me that I was too little, too slow, too weak. Still, I admired her, and in my eyes, she was larger than life. That admiration, however, was never returned the way I had hoped. Our parents often compared us, sometimes without realizing the damage it caused. She was the wild one, the girl who could light up a room with her boldness, while I was the quiet, thoughtful child who preferred books and drawing. When she got in trouble, it was brushed off as just her personality. When I made mistakes, they lingered, turning into lessons I was expected to learn. The imbalance created a silent wedge between us, and I could feel her resentment whenever I was praised for being the responsible one. As we grew older, the comparisons only sharpened. In school, she was popular, surrounded by friends, always invited to parties. I was the girl who blended into the background, noticed only by teachers who praised my grades. It didn't matter that we excelled in different ways. Somehow, it always turned into a competition. And she hated losing. Even when I wasn't competing, she treated my small victories as though I had stolen something from her. I remember one birthday years ago when I unwrapped a sketchbook my parents had given me. My eyes lit up, thrilled by the gift. But when I looked at her, I caught the subtle roll of her eyes. That night, she accidentally spilled juice all over the first page I had drawn on. She laughed it off, pretending it was clumsy play, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't an accident. It was her way of reminding me that my joy was always fragile in her presence. In high school, things only escalated. She was the center of attention, and I became used to being introduced as her sister rather than by my own name. I didn't mind, not at first, but I began to notice how much she minded when the roles were reversed. On the rare occasions someone asked her about me, about my art, my grades, or my plans, her smile would falter. She wanted the world to revolve around her, and any spotlight that drifted in my direction seemed to fuel a quiet storm inside her. Despite all this, I still craved her approval. I still invited her to join me, still defended her when others criticized her recklessness, still hoped that one day we'd stand side by side without this invisible wall between us. But every attempt to bridge the gap felt like building a bridge over quicksand. No matter how strong I tried to make it, it always collapsed under the weight of her jealousy. College created even more distance. I pursued my passions, made new friends, and started to build an identity that was mine alone. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't living in her shadow. But the moment I started thriving, she seemed to wither. Phone calls with her grew shorter. Visits home became tense, and every achievement I shared seemed to sharpen the bitterness in her tone. I couldn't understand why my success had to feel like her failure. So when my 21st birthday came, I knew there was history beneath the surface. I had felt it for years, the quiet rivalry, the unspoken anger, the moments when love felt dangerously close to hate. The party wasn't just about me turning 21. It was a trigger, a symbol that I had reached a milestone, that I was stepping into adulthood on my own terms. And for her, that was unbearable. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. The sharp glances, the clenched fists, the quiet whispers when she thought I wasn't listening. It wasn't sudden rage that made her lash out that night. It was years of small resentments, piled high until they exploded in front of everyone. What happened at the party was just the breaking point, the moment when all those buried emotions tore their way to the surface. And yet, even knowing all this now, I couldn't have predicted how far she was willing to go, or how quickly the celebration would spiral into chaos once her anger finally took control. Because when she snapped, it wasn't only my nose that shattered. It was the fragile illusion of sisterhood I had been clinging to my entire life. The shift from laughter to silence was so sudden, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. One moment, I was surrounded by friends dancing and singing, and the next, her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" she shouted, her words slurred but sharp enough to silence the music. My heart sank instantly, and every eye turned in her direction. I froze, a smile still half-formed on my face, unable to process what was happening. The room fell quiet, except for the faint hum of the speakers. She stood there, swaying slightly with a glass in her hand, her eyes locked on mine with a fury I had never seen before. My friends exchanged nervous glances, whispering under their breath, unsure if they should intervene or wait. "I'm sick of it," she continued, stepping closer. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from rage that had been building for years. "Every time, it's about you. Your birthday, your achievements, your perfect little life. What about me?" Her words stung. Not because they were true, but because they revealed just how deep her resentment ran. I wanted to respond, to calm her down, but my voice caught in my throat. I raised my hands gently, trying to diffuse the situation. "It's not like that," I whispered, but my voice was barely audible over the pounding in my chest. I could feel my cheeks burning as all eyes stayed fixed on us. It was my party, my night, and suddenly I was being stripped of all dignity in front of the very people I had invited to celebrate with me. Before I could say another word, she slammed her glass down onto the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Gasps filled the room. My heart raced as she stepped right up to me, so close I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Her eyes were wild, her fists clenched. The tension was unbearable, the kind of silence that comes before a storm no one can stop. And then it happened. Her hand shot out faster than I could react, crashing into my face with a force I'll never forget. The crack of my nose breaking was loud enough to make people flinch, and the pain was instant, blinding. Warm blood poured down my face, dripping onto my dress and splattering the floor. The room erupted into screams and shouts, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heartbeat and the ringing in my ears. I stumbled backward, clutching my face, my vision blurred by tears and blood. Someone grabbed me, holding me upright, while others rushed forward to push her away. The music had stopped, but the chaos had only begun. People were shouting, some at her, some at me, some at each other. But the only thing I felt was betrayal, raw and cutting. She didn't even look sorry. She stood there, chest heaving, her eyes still locked on me with a twisted mixture of satisfaction and anger. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, building up to it, and finally, she had broken through. My guests stood frozen, unsure whether to comfort me or confront her. The party had transformed into a battlefield, and no one knew what to do. I remember one friend screaming, "Call 911," while another tried to press napkins against my bleeding nose. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, and I could barely breathe. My sister, meanwhile, shouted at everyone, insisting she had been pushed to her limit, that I had always been the problem. Her words were venom, spilling out for everyone to hear, her voice cracking under the weight of her fury. The chaos only deepened as more people tried to intervene, voices clashing, emotions exploding in every corner of the room. I could feel my strength slipping, my knees weak, my vision swimming. And in that dizzy, agonizing moment, I realized the night was no longer about a birthday. It was about survival, about holding myself together while everything else crumbled around me. Because if breaking my nose was just the beginning of her outburst, what would come next was far more unpredictable and far more terrifying. The living room, once glowing with laughter and music, had transformed into a scene of chaos. Blood dripped steadily from my nose onto the polished floor, staining the tiles with proof of my sister's rage. Guests moved frantically, some reaching for their phones, others shouting directions no one seemed to follow. The air was thick with panic, every second stretching into eternity. My body trembled, not only from the pain, but from the crushing weight of humiliation. I remember sitting down on the couch, clutching the bundle of napkins someone had shoved into my hands. My dress, once the centerpiece of the night, was now ruined, streaked with blood that wouldn't wash away so easily. My head pounded, each heartbeat sending a fresh wave of agony through my face. I wanted to disappear, to wake up and find that this nightmare hadn't happened. But the looks on everyone's faces reminded me it was all too real. My friends hovered around me, whispering words of comfort, their hands gently resting on my shoulders. But their eyes betrayed them. Shock, pity, and disbelief filled their expressions. I wasn't the radiant birthday girl anymore. I was the victim, and they didn't know how to reconcile the two. I could feel my cheeks burning, not just from the injury, but from the shame of being torn down so brutally in front of the people I had invited to celebrate me. Across the room, my sister stood defiantly, her chest heaving, her fists still clenched as if ready for more. "She deserved it!" she spat, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and I watched as friends turned their heads toward her in disbelief. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even hiding. She was proud, convinced that she had been justified in destroying me on my own birthday. One of my closest friends, enraged, stepped forward to confront her. "Are you insane? You broke her nose," he shouted, his voice trembling with anger. My sister shot him a glare so sharp it could have cut through glass. "You don't know her like I do," she snapped back. "You all see this perfect angel, but she's been taking everything from me my whole life." Her words sliced through me harder than the blow had. To her, this wasn't just an accident. It was years of resentment finally spilling out in front of everyone. The room turned into a battleground of voices. Some shouted at her, demanding she leave, while others tried to calm her down before things got worse. A few guests, uncomfortable and overwhelmed, slipped quietly out the door, their absence leaving empty spaces in the chaos. What was supposed to be the happiest night of my life had become the night people couldn't wait to escape. Meanwhile, I sat frozen, torn between anger and heartbreak. A part of me wanted to scream back, to expose her lies and remind everyone that I had done nothing to deserve this. But my voice felt trapped in my throat, smothered by the weight of her words. I could only sit there, bleeding, while she painted me as the villain in her story. And the worst part? Some people actually looked uncertain, caught between what they had seen and what she claimed. Eventually, someone managed to pull her away, dragging her toward the kitchen as she continued yelling. Her voice echoed through the house, each accusation more venomous than the last. She's always been the favorite. She's always had everything handed to her. The guests exchanged nervous glances, some shaking their heads, others avoiding my eyes altogether. Her fury had not only broken my nose, but also cracked open the image of our family that I had desperately tried to protect. I sat in silence, letting the noise wash over me. The celebration was gone, replaced by a heavy cloud of despair that no one could lift. The candles had burned out, the decorations seemed cheap and hollow, and the room reeked of alcohol and blood. My 21st birthday had turned into a scene people would talk about for years, not because of joy or milestones, but because of violence and betrayal. And as I sat there, holding a blood-soaked napkin to my face, I realized something I had never dared to admit before. The bond between me and my sister was broken beyond repair. This wasn't just a fight or a moment of weakness. It was the end of something fragile we had been pretending to hold together. And though the party was over, the real consequences of that night were only just beginning. The morning after my birthday, the house was eerily quiet. The decorations still hung limply from the ceiling, but instead of joy, they felt like cruel reminders of what had happened. The air smelled faintly of spilled alcohol and frosting from the cake no one had eaten. My head throbbed as I opened my eyes, and for a brief second, I hoped it had all been a nightmare. But then, the sharp ache in my nose reminded me that reality was much worse than any dream. I dragged myself to the bathroom, each step heavy, and when I finally looked into the mirror, I barely recognized the girl staring back at me. My nose was swollen and bruised, purple and blue spreading across my face like ink stains. My eyes were puffy from crying, my lips cracked and pale. I touched the bandage lightly and winced from the pain. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. The girl in the reflection looked broken, humiliated, stripped of the confidence she had worn so proudly the night before. My phone buzzed on the counter with endless notifications. Messages from friends poured in, some offering support, others still in shock over what they had witnessed. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," one read. Another simply said, "Are you okay?" But the one that hit hardest was, "I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of it." Even they couldn't shake the memory, and now I realized I would never be able to either. That crack, the sound of my sister's rage, would haunt me forever. Downstairs, my parents were waiting. The moment I walked into the kitchen, their eyes widened in horror. My mother gasped, rushing toward me with trembling hands, while my father's face hardened into something unreadable. They hadn't been home the night before, and now they were forced to face the wreckage. "What happened?" my mother whispered, though I could see in her eyes she already knew. I wanted to explain, but the words stuck in my throat. How do you tell your parents that one daughter destroyed another in front of everyone? When my sister finally appeared, the tension in the room cracked like glass under pressure. She didn't look guilty. Her hair was messy, her eyes bloodshot, but her chin was lifted as if daring us to confront her. My father's voice thundered across the table. "What the hell were you thinking?" She rolled her eyes, muttering, "She deserved it." My mother cried harder, begging her to stop, but my sister refused to back down. It wasn't regret I saw in her eyes, it was defiance. She believed her own narrative. That day felt endless. Relatives called after hearing rumors from the guests who had already spread the story. Some voiced sympathy, while others asked uncomfortable questions, their curiosity disguised as concern. I could feel the shame growing heavier with every call. I didn't want to be a scandal. I didn't want to be the girl whose birthday ended in blood. But that's exactly who I had become, and there was no way to hide it anymore. I retreated to my room, shutting the door against the world. The voices downstairs grew louder, my parents arguing with my sister, their anger and sorrow echoing through the walls. I curled into bed, clutching a pillow, trying to block it all out. The pain in my face was sharp, but the pain in my chest was worse. Birthdays were supposed to mark beginnings, but mine felt like an ending. The ending of innocence, of family unity, of the bond I thought could survive anything. As night fell, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Her eyes filled with hate, the sound of bone breaking, the silence that followed. I wondered if things would ever be normal again, if there was any path to forgiveness or healing. But every time I thought about her standing there, unapologetic and proud, the answer became clearer. Some things can't be repaired. Some wounds don't close. The next morning would come, and with it, more whispers, more questions, more reminders of what had been lost. But for now, lying in the darkness, I understood one truth with painful clarity. My sister hadn't just broken my nose that night. She had broken us, and the cracks would never fully mend. Looking back now, I realize my 21st birthday was never about the candles, the cake, or the milestones. It became a night that forced me to face truths I had been avoiding for years. I had always hoped my sister and I could overcome the rivalry that simmered between us, that love would be enough to bridge the cracks. But what happened in front of all those guests proved something I didn't want to admit. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us the most. The physical pain healed slowly. The swelling went down, the bruises faded, and eventually the broken nose was just another scar, hidden beneath makeup and time. But the emotional wound remains. Every time I look at photos of that night, the decorations, the friends smiling, the fragments of a party that could have been perfect, I remember the exact second everything shattered. And no matter how many birthdays come after, that memory will always linger in the shadows. What hurts the most is not the punch itself, but the betrayal. I never imagined my sister would choose violence, humiliation, and anger over love. Her actions were more than just a single mistake. They were a reflection of years of resentment boiling over. And while I may forgive her someday, I will never forget how it felt to be broken by the person who should have stood beside me. But even in the darkest moments, there are lessons. I learned that family is not defined only by blood, but by actions, by loyalty, by kindness. That night, my friends became my strength, their support carrying me through when I wanted to collapse. They reminded me that even when one bond fails, others can hold us up. And that's something I will always be grateful for. If you've ever been hurt by someone you love, you know how complicated it feels. The confusion, the pain, the longing for what could have been. It's heavy, but you also know the strength it takes to stand back up, to face the world with your scars and still keep moving forward. That's what this story is about. Not just the moment my sister broke my nose, but the way I chose not to let it define me. I don't share this to make you pity me. I share it because maybe someone out there has felt the same betrayal, the same sting of realizing love can turn to violence. And if that's you, I want you to know you're not alone. We carry our scars, but they don't have to carry us. We can choose to rise above, to find strength in the pain, and to keep living despite what was taken from us. So if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, or even if it just kept you listening until the end, I ask one thing: subscribe to this channel. Here, I want to keep telling stories that matter, stories about love, betrayal, survival, and resilience. Every subscription means I can continue sharing these moments, not just my own, but others too. Because in the end, life isn't about pretending things are perfect. It's about telling the truth, even when it hurts. And if you stay with me, I promise there will always be more truths to uncover, more lessons to learn, and more stories to tell. So hit that subscribe button, join this journey, and let's face those truths together.